Welcome to the Dangerously Divine podcast. I'm your host, Rachel Loren, entrepreneur, life coach, and your new spiritual bestie. We dive deep into all things feminine magnetism, mindset, and empowerment. Prepare to unlock your full potential and activate your feminine gifts. If you're an ambitious woman who's ready to stop playing small, step into your feminine power, and claim a life beyond your wildest dreams, then you're in the right place. So go ahead and turn up the volume. You're about to hear juicy stories, inspirational advice, and transformational tips that'll help you up-level your life and align with the divine goddess within you. More self-confidence, freedom, and abundance are all just a play away. Thank you for listening and enjoy this episode. Hello. Welcome back to the Dangerously Divine podcast. Today, I am joined by Christine Ford, and she is going to talk to us all about Akashic records, karmic cycles, and soul agreements. Thank you so much for being here, Christine.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm very excited to be on your podcast. I love the way that you share your information and just the way that you share your marketing. It's so very eye-catching and beautiful. So I was just like, ooh, this is so exciting to be a part of. And then, the kinds of people that you have on, I think it's fascinating. So I'm excited to be here. Thank you.
Oh, thank you. I so appreciate that. Christine and I were chatting before we hit record on this episode, and I was briefly telling her and telling my mom, we were on the phone also before this episode. My mom's like, oh, what are you recording about today? And I was like, Akashic records. And that's about all I know about it. So I can't say much else, but come to me at the end of my recording and hopefully I'll have more to share. So with all of that said, I know nothing. Maybe my listeners know a little bit of something about it, but it's one of those terms that I've always heard about in the spiritual community. And it's kind of like, I don't know what it's like, but for me, it's like astrology or human design, where it's that is a whole sector in itself. And that's just too much for me to tap into right now. If I'm ever interested, I might later down the line, learn about it. But I'm it's its own thing. And there's people who do this as a profession, and I don't want to take away from them, but I'm excited to learn about it.
Oh, absolutely. It's a fascinating topic. And I've come at it from a very different perspective than maybe a lot of people have learned it from. I know there's lots of places out there you can find certifications for it and all of that. I never went that path. When I was a kid, I was able to connect with angels and passed over loved ones and things like that. So this was a very normal thing for me to connect to that other side. And even my family, they're also intuitive. They've also seen spirits. So it's I kind of grew up with it. And so, it being sort of this, having to find a bridge to get to that side, to get to that information was never really necessary for me. It was more the opposite. I had to learn how to be human, but that's a whole other story. So I would say just to understand the basic concept of the Akashic records is that we live multiple lifetimes, and our Akashic records is like a library of sorts, and it stores all of our memories, gifts, abilities, traumas, events, agreements with ourselves, with others, with certain situations in this library. And so you can go through your library of Akashic records on your own at any time. It's actually a very easy process, but I think, definitely some people like to have a very thought out, measured, logical process behind it. I just organically tune into it by simply asking. And that's how I get a lot of my psychic information. I just simply ask and it just shows up, and there you go, done. So it's not really that fancy to me. But the one thing about Akashic records that people, I think, maybe don't always understand is that all of these lifetimes are occurring simultaneously. And so all of your lifetimes that have ever happened are happening. And so that's why we connect to what we call the multidimensional self. And the multidimensional self is you existing on all planes in every space and every time. And that also connects you to others as well. So there's that gets a little bit deeper into the subject. But if we just stick with it's a lot. I don't want to throw too much at you. But
4 minutes into the episode and you're already dropping knowledge bombs. Oh, I'm so excited already.
So it's fascinating to me because when I first discovered the Akashic records, somebody had done a reading on me, and then she just walked me through a couple of lifetimes, and I was just like, well, this isn't hard. You just go do this. And then eventually it just started coming, because it's as soon as you know to ask for something, you start asking for it, right? And so that's been my experience anyways. And so I started just diving into my own Akashic records. And then when I would start doing work on other people, or sessions and things like that, their Akashic records would like literally show up in my head and through my third eye, because I'm a clairvoyant, clairaudient, clairsentient, and I can even smell. Psychically, it's kind of a lot of information. So anyways, but basically, it would show up and I would just get these, what they looked like were memories. And sometimes they were childhood memories, and other times they were ancestral memories, and other times they were Akashic memories. So, and they would show up because it's like, oh, it's relevant to what you're dealing with right now. And that's why it's relevant for us to even look at this lifetime. Maybe you didn't get the lesson that you needed from that lifetime, and that's why it's coming up, so that you can clear what we would call the karma from that experience, and take in the lesson. And once you take in the lesson, it's done. You don't need to keep repeating it. So unless you think you do, in that case, that's a whole other thing, because that's more based on beliefs. But yeah, just to be really clear with the Akashic records, anybody can access them. Anybody can look into them. You can even go forward in the future. I've done dives where I've gone forward like 300 years into the future. I'm like, I wonder what happens 300 years from now. I'll go to the library 300 years from now to just see what happened in this timeline. That's been interesting. And I just get little bits, because it's like, you don't need to know this. This is not relevant. You're just, your ego just wants to know this. Get out of your spiritual ego and come back to the divine, and you'll be good.
Right. It's like watching a trailer to a movie that's not out yet.
Exactly. But it is, because it's already happened, because the future's already happened. So, but then we get into the concept of multiple futures. And now we're in a whole conversation about timelines. But Akashic records is sort of like the information of the timelines. That's how I see it. That's how I experience it. And that's how, when I connect to others, they show this to me. Their soul brings it to my attention. Hey, we need to focus on this and clean up some stuff here. Right.
Wow. I just want to say that like you're very articulate in the way that you explain this, because like I said, I've never dived into anything remotely close to this. And I was like, it's just something that's like far off. But you describing it as a library of information, it just made so much sense in my head. So I just want to like applaud you at how well you described that. That's beautiful. And I think it does come from maybe the sense that like you've done this your whole life, whether you meant to or not. Can we kind of dive back in your timeline for a little bit and talk, how you realized that you had this psychic ability?
Yeah. So when I was a kid, I found myself just seeing things. I would see things all the time. Now, we can see a lot of things. It's not everything is what it seems to be. And so later on was when I had to learn discernment, which is just being able to, hey, whatever I'm seeing, is it what I'm seeing? Is what the spirit telling me true actually what it is? But that's something I had to learn later. So when I was a kid, though, I see spirits walking around the house all the time. And sometimes I would go to places where it was really haunted, and I would just talk to the beings there. And somebody had taught me at one point when I was a teenager, like, if you see a spirit, like ask them if you can support them in exiting and moving on. And usually they might have they'll have a message, or they'll say, oh, I'm concerned about this. And then, they're ready to go, and then they go on. And usually I would just ask Archangel Michael to help me out with that. But when I was a kid, it was just so normal, like just to have tea parties with my angels and to, talk. And there was dark stuff too. It wasn't all love. It was definitely there were things stuck in closets and things that would move books around the house and stuff like that. And I get this very sense of like, I'm not safe. And of course, that's something I learned later on, how to really anchor myself in, so that, I can exercise an entity without causing harm to myself or feeling afraid of it. And ultimately what I learned was that these beings are basically like people, in that you need to exercise good boundaries with them. Right. And so the other thing about, being tuned into this world is that I would tune into various timelines, and I, travel through, I guess we would call it astral travel. And it would just be a normal thing that I would do. But I just thought I was making stuff up. And so, but it wasn't until later on that I realized, no, I'm not actually making stuff up. I'm actually traveling. And so, learning to stay in my body was like, again, that was my mission. But exploring these worlds gave me like an escape to go somewhere that, excited me, thrilled me, brought me a sense of connection that I was seeking, that I wasn't having in my physical experience. I was a bit of a black sheep of the family. And typically, when we're in that position of being very tuned in, very connected to the other side, we tend to find ourselves in the position of being a black sheep, if you will. And so,
Right.
yeah, learning about the Akashic records gave me a lot of understanding of like what I was seeing, because I would see things and I wouldn't understand what it was, where it was coming from, who it was about, any of that stuff. I just didn't really know why I was seeing what I was seeing. And so I would make art about it. I went to school for art just to like get it out of my head and put it somewhere. So I've made lots of private art and stuff like that, and paintings and things like that. But yeah, it just felt like it was crazy though, because something that's coming to mind is that when I was a kid, I was, envy other people's lives so much that I would take a book, I would read it, and I would literally pull in the timeline of the character of the book without realizing, because I was so disconnected from myself and like my own life. And I didn't want to have my own life because I'm like, I don't want to be the weirdo. I don't want to be the person who has this weird stuff going on. It can't relate to other people and it can't be normal and stuff like that. So I'm going to try and fit myself into this false reality. But all of these things exist in different timelines and different parallel dimensions. Like everything exists. Everything that you think exists does exist, and including the stuff you think doesn't exist also exists. So it just takes us into this world of like, if there's so much information, if there's so much out there, if there's so much for me to be aware of, what's important for me to be aware of, what's relevant for me to be aware of, what's going to serve my soul's growth in this experience. And so that was part of the journey of, don't get lost in this, but rather find your inner navigation, which is that I call it the inner compass. And I find it located usually in the heart or the solar plexus. And you can just kind of let your body show you the way, so that your mind doesn't get sort of, carried away on the sea of all of this information, on the sea of all these different realities and timelines, whether it's in the past or it's in the future, or if it's happening now, it's all happening.
Yeah. Wow. So many good pieces that we could continue this conversation on. It reminds me, I was scrolling on Instagram this morning and I saw an ad, and I get these ads for like these, like, they call it feminine energy, but I really don't think it is. It's like these like manipulation tactics of like powerful, high value women. And I get them because like that's what I write a lot about on Instagram. And so naturally it thinks that I'm interested in this like cheap money grab. But anyway, part of this ad that I was watching was about like feminine archetypes. And it was like the 4 archetypes of the queen. And I don't know how true those things are, but it was talking about how women, before they become a queen, are obviously like in this princess phase. And what keeps a lot of people there is they have sort of an overabundance of information, and they get analysis paralysis and they don't know what to do with it. And so they're stuck in kind of like this, woe is me. I know I'm meant for something, but I'm not sure what yet. So I'm just going to stay here and wait until I actually know what I'm meant to do. And I feel like that kind of relates to what we're talking about right now, because like you said, everything exists. What we think is real, what we don't think is real, what we imagine, everything is real. And so it gets to be a freaking lot. It's a lot. And like I said, I don't know how true that Instagram ad was, but it just caught my attention and I was like, oh, okay. Yeah, this kind of resonates with me. And then was talking about like different queen archetypes. And so how do you think that you've come to decipher what is, a message that you should do something with and take, and is part of that? How do you know what is a message for your internal compass versus what is just noise out there?
The question of ages. It's kind of along the lines of why am I here?
Oh shoot! You don't have to ask that. I can ask them.
It's okay. It's okay. I don't mind. I'm just saying everyone's process for this is going to be different. So I'm going to just set that as the groundwork here. Your process is going to be different than my process was. So all I can do is share my process of what discernment was for me. And so that was kind of part of what led me on my journey of like recognizing I wasn't even in my body half of the time. I was like somewhere else. People would look at me and be like, you're so spaced out. They'd be talking to me for like 10 minutes. And then I'd hear the end of the conversation. And all I'm remembering is the first part of the conversation. So I was just zoned out, was not here. And so part of being here is also exercising that discernment and then consciously choosing moment to moment that I'm going to be here now. I'm going to be in my body now. And funny enough, that's the quote that's been coming up in my mind is be here now. The last week or so, I keep hearing it. So, and it's, that's part of the discernment process, is to actually be in your body, to connect with your body, to recognize that your mind is going to tell you one thing. Your heart might tell you something completely different. Your body's going to tell you more along the lines of truth, and your soul is going to tell you the ultimate truth, or your higher self, or, your connection to the divine, however you want to experience that or use that in a terminology. So I go to the divine first. That's just my thing. That's how I do it. And I have to go past the mind. I have to go past the heart. And so what I do is I go into a little bit of a meditative state, but because I'm so fast at it now, I can do it in about a second or two. Some people need to take a full meditation, and they should, if especially if they're very mental and they just get very influenced by external things. Now, the thing is, when we're getting influenced by external things, usually we're consenting to that on some level. And so, that's where sometimes our soul agreements and other types of agreements come into play, where we have to make a decision. Am I going to continue playing out this influence, or am I going to release it and actually align to what my soul is guiding me to? Now, the thing is, we can go in alignment with the soul and can say, I'm going to choose the soul path. I'm going to choose the soul path, and keep doing that. That's important. But you have to take your body with you. You have to take your heart with you. You have to take your body with you. You have to take your mind with you. If they're not aligned with the soul, then you have to fix that, I guess, mismatch, because there's an inner conflict. And whenever you're in inner conflict, it's like rowing in two different directions, and then you end up rowing in circles. And so, part of the discernment is to recognize, like, well, there's a reason that I'm being influenced by, say, this external thing that's coming through the mind. There's a reason that my heart is not on board with this thing. Maybe I need to look at something here. Maybe I was hurt by something that I haven't let go of, that I haven't forgiven, that I haven't dealt with within myself. Maybe I was looking for love and I didn't get it from my upbringing. And so now I need to actually dote on myself and actually take action on that and complete that cycle within myself. Maybe my body is carrying trauma in the cells. So we would call that cellular memory. And so maybe I need to look at what my cells are telling me and actually have a relationship with them, have a relationship with these parts of me. And as I have a deeper relationship with these parts of me and my soul, I will get truth, because truth is never going to be conflicting in your mind, your heart, or your body. Truth is always going to it's going to drop in, and it's going to feel like total clarity. However, if you are out of sorts, if you are in conflict, if you are looking at life or yourself through a distorted lens because you've been wounded or whatever happened, right? We all have our burdens to bear. We all have something that we have to overcome, no matter where we come from. We all came in with, okay, you're going to work through this stuff in this lifetime. That was your agreement. That's your soul agreement. And however long that takes you is however long that takes you. That's fine. There's no judgment on that. And so, once we work through those major karmic lessons, as we would call them, you start to come into more of who you are. And as you come into more of who you are, you end up really knowing what's true for you and what's not true, what's been a distortion, what's been conditioning, what's been wounding. I guess human design would call it conditioning, right? And so that's more or less how I learned to discern. It was like, well, I'm seeing something, the spirit is telling me that it's this, but is it really that? And do I know that for sure? And so I have to get clear within myself. What part of me wants to believe this? There's a deception here, because that can be a wound. Being suspicious of everything around you, that's a wound.
Right.
On the other side of it is, what if you walk around the world with rose-colored glasses and you think, oh, no one's going to do anything bad. Everyone's good at heart, because you don't want to see shadows. Because if you see shadow in someone else or a situation, you would have to acknowledge the shadow in yourself. So it's that working through all the parts of you that are maybe in denial of something or in avoidance of something, but also, obsessed with something. Like, you can get obsessed with shadow work and forget the light. And, so it's really just about achieving a state of balance within yourself. And that's a process, right? You don't do that overnight typically. And so as we go through our lives, we work to find balance in every situation and every decision in every moment. And the more balanced we are, the more light we hold in our body, the more discerning and clear we are about what is true for us and what is a program, what is conditioning, what is ancestral wounding, or what have you.
That was a great answer. Wow. And I love that you kind of prefaced it with like, this is just your process, because I'm sure there are other processes, but I think, any little bit of info that we can take from that is super helpful. Because on the show here, we talk a lot about intuition versus ego. And so, yeah, as you were mentioning all of that and, dropping into the body and, not necessarily believing everything your mind tells you, I'm like, that is a huge process in itself, let alone everything else to follow. So, yeah, I think that was a beautiful, explanation of how you do what you do. And I have my follow-up question for you is, I know you said that, like, if you have made this agreement, and we haven't really gotten into really what those agreements are, but you said, yeah, like if you get into this agreement and you have to like overcome this obstacle throughout your lifetime, but, not necessarily in any particular time, just as it comes. What would you say if I were to ask you, like, what if you do that as a child? Are there other lessons or things that come up? Or is it just like one for your whole life? I don't know if that question makes sense to you.
No, it does. So sometimes like people will talk about themes of lessons. And so you could have a theme that spans for like, say, 10 years, right? Then you would have another theme. And the thing is, there's a point at which, okay, you've gone as far as you can. And so you're not going to not have lessons going forward, but you might go as far as you can on one lesson to the point where it's okay, this is as far as I can go. Like, and your soul will be in agreement with that. That's not like usually a mental decision. It's usually a soul agreement. And so it's like, I will pick this up later. But most of the time, especially I find in this lifetime in particular, a lot of people are coming up to the end of their karmic agreements. And we're actually moving into what we'd call like the new earth or the higher heart or, the kingdom, whatever term suits you. That's kind of, we're moving into that where it's basically a reality without karma. And so when we don't live in constantly creating and finishing karma with ourselves and with each other, then we can actually move into this more expansive, heart-centered way of living, right? Because the higher heart doesn't have karma. The lower heart does.
Right.
The higher heart doesn't create karmic contracts or agreements or, oh, you did this to me in that lifetime, so I'm going to do it to you in this lifetime. Like that's that tit for tat karmic agreement. But your soul, like you have an agreement to do it, right? And you're like, I want to complete this. But you can actually complete your own karma. You don't necessarily have to always go through a physical situation with a person. I've actually cleared karmic patterns from people and myself as well, without actually having to go back into, say, the relationship that started it. And that requires a level of like, I'm willing to put myself in your shoes to try and understand you at a greater level, not just from your ego, but from the greater level, and to complete that, because I don't want to keep this going because it's not in my highest good. It's not in alignment with my, I guess, next level expansion in terms of my moving into the higher heart. We do have particular agreements to complete certain cycles and things like that and all of that. And then, we can make choices as we go forward. There is like an element of free will. I know some people will argue that free will was made before we entered the body. And so, that's an argument that, could be legitimate. And I would say, go there if you want to. Like, I'm never the person to judge you on the journey, because it's like, well, clearly you want to explore this for a reason, and that's a good thing, right? And so, it's just trust yourself. And I think that's one of the biggest things that people have a hard time doing, is fully trusting themselves to explore the next level of their path. Oh, I went through this cycle and it was so hard. And it's like, well, did it have to be hard? Because it's like, it doesn't have to be hard. Like, that's the ego. The ego wants to make it hard because it's like, look, I earned it. And so the ego just like has a little bit of a sadistic personality at times with us, but that's just us, right? That's just an element of us. And so once we recognize that, it's not an external thing coming to get us. It's not, out there, right? It's all here now. The way I saw it in a meditation recently is it's like kind of like being in this circus tent, and you're flying around, doing different flips and, all of these different things that they do in like a circus tent, or like the acrobatic performers, I mean, and everything's there. Everything's under the tent. And it's like, that's your whole life. That's everything. It's all here now. It's all right here. And I don't know, that like really blew my mind at the time, because I was like, wait, I don't have to go anywhere to figure this out. I don't have to go anywhere to do this. It's here. And so it all just kind of comes to me. And you were talking about the archetype of the queen. And I think that there's an element to that sort of plays into that. Like, well, if it's all here, it's all coming to my inner palace, if you will, to be resolved. And I can resolve it here and now. But I have to be honest with myself. Am I ready to resolve it here and now? So some part of me that feels like I need to work out some more stuff on this, or can I let it go now? And that's the ultimate thing here, is that, and I've definitely gone through my own version of that, where it's like, okay, I've played out this program many, 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 many times. Can I be done with it? Is there some part of me that really needs to hold on to this? Is this something that I really have to keep doing? And once you're asking yourself that question, the answer is no.
Right.
Okay.
And that's the ego, the sadistic ego coming in.
Exactly. That's like, my goodness, this ego is got some stuff going on. Like, let me just go nurture her a little bit. Like, who hurts you, kind of thing.
Well, you must know.
I know that's a loaded question.
Right.
And I'm just being facetious, obviously. But yeah, I feel like, definitely we can go through these karmic cycles faster. We don't have to take that long. And yes, there are always going to be new ones that will come up. And it's not because of the people around us. Okay. It's like, oh, I got into this new relationship, but then I had my stuff come up. Yeah, because pretty much most things in this reality function as some form of a mirror. It's trying to show you something. Are you going to take that knowledge and empower yourself with it and say, you know what? I'm going to look at this and I'm not going to be afraid of it. And I'm not going to judge myself or criticize myself for it. I'm not going to repeat what my mom told me about this kind of thing, or my dad, or whoever brought me up. Instead, I'm going to make a decision that I'm going to face this within myself. And I know that I'm safe to do it because it's me and the divine. We're together, we're one, and we're going to face this together. And it's okay. And it's okay that I mess up. It's okay that I don't get it the first time. And so I think there's just something really powerful in acknowledging these reflections that we see. And, if you do have a past life where you did something, quote unquote, terrible, it's like when you understand it from that higher universal perspective, it's like everything has a purpose and it was designed for some reason. It might not even be something related to you at all. Could have been something to do with other souls that were part of the process. And so when we get into that, it's like, okay, I don't need to judge myself for this anymore. Like I can let go of that judgment because that judgment isn't coming from the divine. It never was.
That kind of answered the question that I was just typing out because I didn't want to forget it. But yeah, oh my God, you're blowing my mind right now. But what we just mentioned about having this sadistic ego and repeating the same, lessons in multiple lifetimes and then maybe letting it go. Does it feel like sometimes we're putting karmic cycles on ourselves just because we feel that we deserve it? Or, I don't know. Does that make sense?
Yeah, because so I know that some people will differentiate the soul and the divine. And I think that's correct. I think there is a differentiation because the soul has a path. It has things that it wants to accomplish. And the divine just wants to know itself, right? It's just like, okay, like it all goes like, I just want to know myself better. So when the soul agrees to take on karmic contracts, it's usually because there's something incomplete in the lifetime, or there's something incomplete with an agreement with another person or with the self even. Like maybe you're learning about self-love, right? And so if you're learning about self-love, and you really didn't get it the last lifetime, if you will, again, we're talking about a linear concept that isn't actually linear.
Right.
So if you think about it that way, these lessons transcend the lifetimes. And so they're just like, okay, I'm just working on this lesson in the lifetime. And so the karmic cycle will come up like where I ignored the lesson. I denied the lesson. I didn't want to deal with the lesson. I felt like something external was the cause of my suffering. And that's valid to feel that way, right? Because we can't move forward until we accept what we feel and what we think and what we believe in that moment, right? And then when we say, okay, but that's a version that I could choose. That's a reality I could choose. Or I could say, you know what? I get it. I feel complete with that. I don't need to keep doing this. It's like kind of like they say, like, things like you can be your initial anger is about like 10 to 15 seconds. And that's actually how long your anger lasts. If it lasts longer than that, it's because you are prolonging it. You're holding on to something from the situation. But it's really interesting because when I look at children, I see like they're very light, like they like in terms of like they are pure light. And so things come in and they go right out. And that's actually how it's supposed to be. But because we come out of a lot of density, I guess, and the planet's gone through periods of like heavy density, darkness, if you want to call it that, things get stuck, right? And that's why we have body pain. That's why we might have, typical patterns that play out. It's because we didn't let whatever energy needed to move through us go. We just held on to it. I need to hold on to it to justify it's happening. It's like, okay, what happened. Can you accept that it happened? And can you then let it go? You can't accept that it happened, or you can't, allow this, okay, it means something about me because this happened. So I have to keep denying it. You're going to hold on to that stuff. Right. And so the karmic cycles are created by us. We can participate in them, and we can choose also to not participate in them, but we can't do it from just saying it in our mind. Like we have to be, like I said, it's a full body decision. It's a full, mind, body, spirit, heart, like all complete.
Right.
And so if it's not moving through you, like gone, and even this, I know this is another subject, but this even can transcend your memories. Like your memories are also very much conceptual. A lot of things that we remember are based on like a perception that we were holding at the time. And so if we let go of that perception, and therefore the version of us that we're playing in that pattern or that memory, that actually also releases karma.
So beautiful. I think about too, like for me, everything is a self-fulfilling prophecy. And I'm like, if you feel or you think one certain way, that has to, be true. And so I think if we can kind of save ourselves from our mind and what our brain is thinking, and like you said, get into the body or, ask the divine, that is, how we can really save ourselves from these, ways of thinking, because our mind is kind of evil.
I guess you could say it is evil, but at the same time, it's kind of like when I talked about dark spirits, like entities, and like I said, I've done exorcisms and things on people and houses and even animals, and not most of the time, it's like I look at them and I'm just like, why are you here? Like what's your deal?
That's so chill. I would be crying. You're so brave.
Well, it's just once you get to the point where you're like, okay, like they can't mess with me because like nothing has permission to mess with me, then you're good. Then like nothing can haunt you, right? And so when you're at that point, you're like, okay, like I'm looking at you and like you're doing this thing. Why are you here? Like, what's your deal? Like, and it's like they're willing to talk. That's the thing. They're willing to tell you what's up because they're part of their purpose or soul path is to move through and to move on. Like they don't need to stick around. I find a lot of times entities will stick around because this person has an unresolved wound. And so, and whether you call it an entity or you call it just stuck energy or like these kinds of things are interchangeable. It's just a matter of how you perceive them. And I have a very vivid imagination, so I perceive all the things. And so when I would look at them, I'd see snakes or I'd see worms or I'd see rats, an infestation of rats or termites, termites,
right.
like, eating your house, but it's like the inner house. And your inner house being like your foundation. And so what issues do you have with foundation? Like that's where I would go because I'm not really interested in symptoms when I'm doing my work because symptoms are just red flags or red herrings, I guess is the term. And okay, well, what's beyond that? Like what's underneath that that's actually causing this to even pop up to begin with? Because like there's no point in clearing this thing when you're just going to bring it back again because we haven't dealt with the original problem. And so, that's the way I look at it. And so these beings, they don't stick around after the original cause is resolved. They're like, okay, well, I don't really need to be here because they like to kind of consume this sort of painful or dark or fear-based energy and they kind of snack on it. And I'm just like, well, you don't get to snack here. This is not a buffet.
Right.
Out.
Chewing them away when they're done. Do you feel like, okay, does that happen when you're like with a client or a patient? I don't know what you call them in your line of work, but would that happen with someone that you're working with? Or does that happen on your own, just seeing entities?
Both.
Do you have to work with them?
Do I have to work with the entity?
Yeah.
Well, if they're there, then there's obviously a reason they're there. Yeah, like I work with what's there. I don't try to do something that's not there because that would be my ego. And I'm like, no, like God leads these sessions. That's how it works. That's how it is. And it's like, if this is being shown to me, this person is dealing with this particular issue. There's a reason for that. The beautiful thing about the work that I do is that like when I work on it on someone else, it also happens on my end too, where it gets cleared on my end if I have an issue. Because like I said, we're in, relationships are like mirrors. And so if I have a client coming in with a particular issue, usually like either before or after I work with that client, that very same issue will come up in me. And I'll be like, I know what's going on here. So I almost get like a little bit of here's a something ahead of the time, right? So you know what's going to come up. And I used to do this when I would read more into the collective. Now, before I really started just focusing on the one-to-one, I would do collective readings and I'd go through an experience and then I'd write about it. And then 2 weeks later, it would happen to the collective. And then people would read the thing and it's like, oh my gosh, this is happening to me now. I'm like, oh, that was 2 weeks ago, man. It's just funny to me. But it's relevant because it's like, that's why your experience and what you're dealing with on a day-to-day basis, what you're seeing, what you're not seeing, what's occupying your mind matters. And so we don't dismiss anything because everything has relevance, even if we don't always logically understand what the relevance is in that moment.
Right. That makes sense. My next kind of question is, because we talked about how things are mirrors or our relationships with other people are mirrors. What would you say? This is a question for me, I guess. It's more personal. What
cool.
would you say? Like, okay, I know, and we're going to do a session outside of this because I'm very interested now that I know what Akashic records are and all of this. We're going to do a separate session, but I feel like I definitely have healing or like lessons that keep coming up with like love, and all of my friends are starting to get in those relationships where they're serious and marriage, and I almost don't want to be around them because I don't want my presence to impact their relationship, where I'm like, I haven't done the work on myself yet, or I'm still in the process of doing it, so I want to keep you or my friends, I want to keep you good. You know, I don't want my negative energy to like seep all over you and then be a mirror for things that maybe you're not seeing in your own relationship, like ignorance is bliss kind of thing. So that's just one example. But like, where do you see that sort of coming into play? And if so, like, do you have any advice for people who kind of want to do the healing or feel like they need to do the healing individually on their own because they don't want it to impact other people?
So there's no getting around it. We're going to be around other people, whether we, there's, of course, we can make choices in the moment that we don't want to be around certain people. But the thing is, just based on your question, I'm just sensing like, I'm actually seeing the opposite. It's like, I don't want to be mirrored my issues by you. And so if I'm like avoiding this person because I don't want to impact them with whatever I've got going on that's unhealed,
For me,
then there's a good chance. Yeah. There's like, it has to happen because it's resonance. It's happening on both sides, right? It's like the example of the tuning fork is like you hit the fork and then it resonates with the other tuning fork, right? There's a reason that you are together in a relationship, a friendship, connection, a working relationship, whatever it is. And so there's a reason that there's sort of this, okay, I have to avoid this person because I want them to be happy. But like, if they're not really happy, like there's no you avoiding them that's going to protect them from their own unhappiness or their own issues. These issues are meant to come up. It's relevant. It's purposeful. And in fact, I don't know your human design, but like there's a good chance that like you might be the impact that they need in order to address that. That's why, in my case, I'm a manifestor in human design. And so it's like, I will show up and people will get like really uncomfortable all of a sudden. And I'm like, I have to remind myself, like, that's not my causing them discomfort. That's me illuminating the discomfort that was already in them or the trigger or the unprocessed wound. And it's actually divine for me to show up in all of who I am and to not suppress myself and to not hold myself back. Because if I do that, I'm hurting myself because I'm not being authentic. I'm not being real. I'm not, I'm going to hold on to a lot of energy and that's not going to be good for me, right? We want to be light, let the energy move through us. And then the second thing is that, if my showing up in my fullness of who I am triggers this person and they have to work through something, then it's not a disservice. It's a positive thing because that thing is going to exist whether you're there or not. And so if you're a catalyst for their healing, then that's a divine calling in a way, because you don't have to do anything. You just be in that moment. You're just being yourself. And so if you relax a little bit and let people take responsibility for their own issues that are coming up for them, and you take responsibility for your own issues that are coming up for you, you don't have to worry about taking on their emotional burdens. Because that's the kind of feeling I get is like, I don't want to take on their emotional burdens if I bring something up in them, And it's like, you don't have to. You can listen, you can hold space if you want to, if that feels guided for you. But if it doesn't feel guided, if it feels burdensome, first of all, maybe look at something in yourself and see do I feel obliged to do this? Did I have to do this growing up and didn't want to do this? And now I resent it. So there's that side. And then there's the other side of like, let people have their experiences because that's the only way that they're going to grow. If they just stay stuck, they're going to stay stuck. And we want to evolve as souls. This is not about our egos. This is not about, my ego feels good in the moment, so I'm good. That's false. Underneath, you don't feel that good. Underneath something doesn't feel right. And so it's important to be willing and courageous enough to address what is coming up in that moment for you when you're around that person in the happy relationship, and maybe there's a little bit of stuff of, I really want to be in love like they are. And it's not fair. And why can't I have that? There could be some of that. That's inner child. That's like I'm saying like 13. Like, I wish I had the relationship all my friends have. And it's like, you do have that. That's inside of you, but that's a bigger discussion.
Yeah. We'll chat after this. I'm going to start crying now. But I'm also going to see my friends tonight and I'm going to tell them about all of this. So that's great. Awesome. But I think, even more than just with relationships, it happens a lot where, we don't want to like you said, like burden other people, but it's not really a burden because they're going to have the lesson anyway, Yeah. So if it's coming up through their relationship with anyone, with you or with, family, whatever, it's still there. I love that. Exactly. So is there anything that we can kind of do in our daily lives to be more aligned? I know you said that, and I love this. This is probably going to be like the one I post on Instagram about the truth dropping into your whole like mind, body, soul, spirit, and like feeling that alignment. Is there anything that we can do on a day-to-day basis to feel that sense of alignment?
Yeah. So the biggest thing that I just want to tune in and see, there's like a collective message, but it looks like the biggest thing is just to be true to yourself. I think there's this sort of idea that we, and I've done this myself, so, definitely no stranger to this pretense that wants to come up when we're around other people, when we're dealing with certain situations. It's almost like, well, the mind has to look good. The ego has to look good. And so when we kind of let that go, like what's underneath that is the truth, right? And so when we come back to that, it's like, okay, how do I really feel? I love that phrase, tell me what you really think. And I always felt like that was the most confronting like phrase, because it's like people say it in jest, obviously, but I always feel like it's such a call to the truth. Like, can you really tell yourself what you really think, what you really feel, all the things that you're ashamed to admit? Oh, I really think this person is, all up in themselves, or I really think this person needs to like go and, I don't know, deal with some stuff, or I really think that I don't like myself and I don't think I'm attractive, so I need to do this, this, and this. Like whatever it is that like that's those thought processes that go on in your head that you pretend aren't there, but they actually are there. That's where the magic is, because it's like, if you just turn on the light, then the monster under the bed is just a monster under the bed that you're now looking at. And it's like, okay, well, it's scary. Maybe it's unattractive. Maybe it's ugly. Maybe it represents a part of me that I don't want to acknowledge or admit to, but it's still there. And so what if I look at it from the lens of love? What if I look at myself from the lens of love? And I'm not talking about like, I love myself. I'm talking about that higher heart love, the agape love, right? And the love of the divine. So sometimes I'll go into a sort of a process where it's like, if you were to look at yourself through the eyes of the divine, how would you see yourself? And the divine is perfect. It's got everything. It sees you as perfection. That doesn't mean you can't improve. It just means that like that's a lens for you to take while you're on your healing journey and you're looking at your shadows, because your shadows will suddenly be not wrong from the lens of the divine. The shadows will suddenly become teachers.
Right. They're just there.
They're there to help us.
Be judged.
Yeah. Like if you look at life as everything is here to help me, I just don't always understand how. And if I can look at that and I can say, okay, how are you here to help me? How are you here to help me? Be honest, like don't, if you really feel angry about it, get the anger out, work through your emotions, do your emotional processing, however that looks for you. Maybe it's tapping, maybe it's writing, maybe it's drawing. I do a lot of drawing to get out my emotions when I can't think of the words, or I feel confused and my mind feels confused. So I'll just draw or I'll paint, and it could just be scribbles. Like you don't need to be a great artist to do stuff like this. It's just a way for the mind to process, the emotions to process out without you having to always look at everything from a mental, logical state.
Right. That makes sense.
Admitting the truth, admitting the parts of you that are like, okay, I'm really ashamed of this. I feel like this makes me look like a bad person. This makes me feel like I'm going to be unsafe in the presence of others. I'm going to be alone forever. People aren't going to love me because they're going to know this thing about me, or they're going to think this about me. And everyone has these thoughts. Like we're not, it's not like one person, you have them and no one else does. Everyone else is perfect. Mm-hmm. Like, I mean, I think we're in the age of, authenticity now. And so it's like when we are that, and you don't always have to share everything either. You can be authentic just with yourself. And that's the most important authenticity you can have, is to be really honest with yourself. And if you want to be honest with other people after the fact, that's a good thing, because that's going to create good karma, right? Like, I don't know. Somebody I know was like, oh, we're gonna keep this thing hush, hush, hush. And I said, you know what? That's gonna bite you one day. I just know it. So, like nothing stays hidden forever. And so if you can just admit it to yourself first and foremost, you'll be better for it. And at least you'll be clean with yourself with it.
Right. I love that. Clean with yourself. And I love what you said. Does the mind look good? Like, well, it's a mind. It doesn't have to, like once you get over that. Have you ever read the books, the Celestial Prophecy books?
Bits of it. Yeah, I haven't read the whole thing.
Yeah, honestly, I would really recommend it. For me, I like to read a lot, and it's like a fiction book. Like, even though it's fiction and it's made up, it's like still so like, I don't know, like truthful, I feel like. And it does talk about the agape love and also talks about being truthful. And I remember, I think it was like in the fourth book or something, it was talking about like how when you lie or you try and deceive someone, that like you're protecting yourself in the moment, but like that karma will come up. And they didn't call it karma in the book, but it was like you shouldn't do that, because it's just going to be more detrimental in the long run. And that really stuck with me. And I know it's like kind of, I'm not going to say it's dumb, but it's like that is what karma is. but it's like we shouldn't take lying or deceiving someone so lightly. Like, I feel like in our culture today, it's kind of just a thing that like people have gotten in the habit of doing, especially like I remember when I think of like work stuff where I'm like, oh, I didn't get to this deadline, whatever, because I was feeling tired. But like, oh, I can't tell my boss that because like that's not a legitimate reason. And I have to like tell them that I was like actually sick instead of tired. And it's a lot of people do that, I think, with work situations if you have like a normal 9 to 5 kind of job and boss, but more than just that, you know, lying, then you start lying to yourself more. And it's just like this slippery slope that people go down. And so, yeah, I think I love what you said. We all need to like live in our truth and, you know, not just like lies, like actually lying, but like figuring out what your truth is, I think, you know, because it's not always like obvious and that's where a lot of the healing comes in.
Yeah, because I mean, we get to the point where maybe our parents lied to us. And so, you know, it's like we become aware. It's like, it might not have been malicious at all. It could have just been really like, oh, I'm just trying to protect you from some whatever. But it's like, it disconnects you from your inner truth. And so then, you know, you start saying things that you think they're true, but like, you know, deep down, something about this doesn't feel right. I don't know what it is. And this is what we feel on other people when we're looking at people and we're saying, something about this person doesn't feel right, you know? And the thing is, though, it's a double-edged sword because, again, we have to look at our own aspects of where do I deceive myself? Where is it okay for me to deceive myself? And this is a work in progress, you know, like this is going to come up over and over again until you really work out like why it's not okay for you to be who you are, as you are, what you feel, what you think, what you know about yourself, what you feel about the world. Like, why is that not okay? And what part of you is judging it? And the more you work that out, the more you will start to come back into that inner truth and into that inner knowing. And you'll be an expert at spotting a lie because you'll be like, nothing, like I don't vibrate at the frequency of deception. So because I vibrate at the frequency of truth, yeah, it's going to freak people out because a lot of people live behind their lies because it makes them feel safe. It makes them feel a certain way, like, oh, I'll be loved if I appear this way, or if I do this thing, you know, that I don't want to do, like go to work on, you know, at this job that's really like, it's really against my soul at this point. You know, it's like, be okay with the evolution of where your soul is being called to. And the more you're okay with that, the less you judge that, you know, because the linear mind is what's telling you that you need to do this, this, and this, and stay in this cycle or stay in this job or whatever. And of course, you want to make measured, conscious, aware, and logical decisions too, because God isn't against your humanness, right? It's like, no, take it with you. Don't leave it behind. Take it with you. And, you know, the more you are true to yourself, the better you're going to feel and the less you're going to have to deceive yourself or others.
Right. That's beautiful. Take your humanness with you. I love that. Because like we're here, you know, we're meant to be human right now. So, you know, there has to be a good reason, right?
Exactly. I mean, you wouldn't be here if like there wasn't a point to it. So, you know, it's like we're constantly finding that out and learning moment by moment. And we can't isolate ourselves onto an island and avoid the whole world forever, you know? And eventually you're going to have to come out. You're going to have to face yourself and you're going to have to face what you think about others and what you think about the world, maybe what other people taught you, and learn to let those things go because that was the old you. Like, you know, a lot of this stuff programming comes from childhood. It's like, that's the old you. That you might exist on some level inside of you, but why would you keep its wounds? If you can learn the lesson, release the wounding, and actually move forward, you can take your inner child with you. You can take your inner teenager with you, and you can actually have a good time with them. You know, these parts of you meant to go take them on the ship.
Yeah, it's a nice analogy. Take them with you. All right, Christine, we're nearing the end of today's episode. I feel like we could keep talking forever, and we probably will. Now that you're in my world, we'll definitely keep up. But for anyone else that wants to keep up with you or wants to work with you, I'll give you a minute to tell everyone where they can find you and give your links and your handles.
Yes. So best place you can find me right now is on Instagram. I tend to be on Instagram quite a lot, and it's on Christine Ford Alchemist. And so that's one place you can find me. You can find me on Spotify and Apple Podcasts, Healing Words with Christine, and I do post a podcast there now and again, and do some interviews as well. And then another place you can find me is on Facebook, and also old school now. I'm not too much on TikTok at the moment, but yeah, so Facebook, XTeenAnn, ANN, and yeah, that's, I think my TikTok, like I said, I don't go on my TikTok very much. I think it's like Christine Ford Psychic or something like that. But I'll send you the links if you don't already have them. But yeah, just reach out to me on Instagram. Like I'm really open to having conversations right now. Like really want to connect with people and just have real down to earth conversations. Doesn't have to mean anything, doesn't have to go anywhere, but I just really want to, really come back to the world. I was very isolated from the world for a long time. And of course, this brought me through all of this healing work and that, I've had to do and work with others on too. And it's just taught me a lot about, it's okay to be who I am. And so, I'm really open to having conscious conversations. One of the, one way that people can work with me is if they can book healing sessions with me. And so, that's really where I want to lead people at this point. And whatever they feel called to, I think, trust yourself. Like if you, listening to this, feel like I just want to have a conversation, I just want to learn more about this, or I just want, that's okay. Like let's just meet you where you're at and see what the divine has in store. Because if you're here, if you're listening to this, then there's a good chance that there was a divine intervention on some level that created this experience for you to begin with.
Yeah. And why not follow that through? Beautiful. And Christine, I believe you have a quote to end this episode and bring us out. If not the quote that you gave me ahead of time, if anything comes to mind, go ahead. I'll give you the floor to share.
I like this one, so I'll just use it. But lighthouses don't go running all over an island looking for boats to save. They just stand there shining. And that's by Anne Lamott. It's like, be the light that you are. Don't try to go out and save people. Don't try to go out and fix everything in the world. Let yourself just be the light. And sometimes you just being there in the moment as you are, all of who you are, as much as you possibly can be. Don't try to be perfect with it. That's the draw. That's the thing that people resonate with, because they're like, I want to be more of who I am. And how can I do that? And what's in the way? And this person is shining a light here. Let me just see what I can learn from the situation, what I can learn from this person's presence. And maybe you're the person and other people are going to learn from your presence, right? You're the person regardless, by the way. But you don't need to go outside of yourself to find everything. It's not out there. It's here now.
Yeah, I love that. And I'm even thinking, like, first off, I love that quote and I'm going to save that one. But I'm like, imagine how many boats a lighthouse would save if it was running around the island. Maybe like one or two. But if it stays where it's meant to be and just shines its own light, all of the boats are going to head towards it. So it's like, it's more impactful that way when you look at it, like as in being that embodiment of who you're meant to be. So much more impactful than running all over trying to save everyone.
Yeah, I mean, and really when we come back to it, it's like, we don't need to save anybody because everybody is exactly where they're meant to be. If we're called to support, that's a different thing. That's not the same as saving people. But when people are going through their stuff, you can just be there with them and just hold them in your heart and love them through it. Because love is the ultimate healer. It's like most of us are looking for something, and most of the time it's actually love when it comes down to the bottom of it.
All right, Christine, we are at the end of today's episode. For all of you interested, I will put Christine's links in the bio. But thank you so much for being here. This has been such a fun conversation. And yeah, I will see you all next Thursday on the Dangerously Divine podcast. Thanks, Christine.
Thank you.